Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best of Three podcast. I'm Alvin, joined once again by my main man, Torrey Hawkins. Torrey, how are we doing this evening?
I've been doing well, man. Welcome back. I hear Punta Cana is pretty nice this time of year, so welcome back. And if you would, tell us a little bit about your trip. I'm sure you were just hating it over there.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible. It was, for some reason, it wouldn't get any colder than 70 or any warmer than 80.
You poor soul. I mean, how did you ever survive?
Yeah, exactly. And apparently weather here in Atlanta was I picked a good time to be gone. Apparently it was quite frigid, quite wet.
Wet and frigid. Let me just say 18 degrees on the 10th. I want to say my feels like that day read 11 degrees.
Wow.
So the day you sent me that darn picture of yours with all the palm trees, I was literally coming in from taking out the trash, and it was 11 degrees on the feels like. The wind gusts later that day were 15 miles an hour. And the wind gusts were up to 25 miles an hour.
There you go.
15 and 25 on my little Weather Underground app. And I'm sitting there like, oh, you couldn't have timed it any better.
It was great. It was great. It was we stayed at a Club Med, an all inclusive. Got to play a lot of tennis, which was a little surprising how much I played.
Nice.
But it was great. Got out there, did some of the group instructional work on the first day, and I assumed that was going to be my week, just kind of popping into the group lessons. Kind of took me back to like early juniors where it's like, 8 people in a line, you get to do a little 4-ball, you want to look good in front of everybody, do your thing, and then head to the back of the line. And so I did that the first day, and then the second day, this dad, French guy, and his son, who I saw hit the day before, comes over to me. He's like, he motions like, hey, you want to come hit with us? And I was like, sure. So I hit with his son. Son's 14, pretty good player. And so we're just grinding from the baseline for about 10-15 minutes, and start hitting some volleys, and then the class is about to start, and he's like, hey, we've had some other friends come in and meet us and hit on the backcourts. So I was like, right now? He's like, yeah, right now. So I go back there with them, and it's like Fern Gully. You're going through the woods, you get to these other courts, and there's like other really good players back there. It's like, this guy played D1 at Missouri. Like, he's a little older than me, but that guy's good. And then this guy played at D3 Swarthmore. I think they won a national championship. It's just like this one dude comes out, and he's like, he's like, I don't hit much, I live in New York, but like we have a court at my house in the Hamptons, and like his forehand looks like he's got a house just cleaner than Christmas. Like, Jesus, man. I was like, we were all just like, what is this? Who is this guy? It was but it was great, and it was like the kind of like small little, it felt like its own little mini tennis club by the end of the week. Like, and there was one of the guys had a son who was 13, junior player, like real nice kid, asked a lot of questions, like
nice.
Plays out of a club called Match Point, I think, over in Brooklyn.
Yep, I've heard of it.
Yeah. So just a great group of guys. Gonna try to link up with them when I go up for the Open in August. But it was the tennis you hope for when you get together with some people. Fantastic.
Well, I'm happy for you, man, and more for the tennis, obviously, than the darn palm trees you were showing me as I was enviously looking at the warmth. You know what I mean? So, and that's pretty rare. I maybe that's Club Mids all the time, but I gotta think that many good players at a vacation little resort spot for a week just happened to be, that was just good timing.
Yeah, I mean, it was so President's Day was that week, right? So our kids had winter break, and up north in New York, like that's a week they always have off. Down here, not all the time, not every school district does. So it was like everyone I met was either from New York or from France. And this most of these people in this group happened to be from New York. Some of them two families came together, 2 of the other ones just happened to be there. So yeah, it was fantastic.
Awesome.
It was fantastic. Yeah.
Awesome.
One of the guys snuffed me out in the semifinals of the tournament. I didn't come in tournament ready, but next year I will be.
Next year I will
be.
But yeah, enough. They snagged you from the 8-person in line forehand drill. So I mean, you probably did pretty well to get to the semis with that group. They were probably
I did okay.
Fine, looking over at you from between the bushes. he looks pretty good. Go grab him. We need an eighth for the tournament.
Yeah. I did okay. It was a fun week though, and that's what made the memories.
Yeah.
But yeah, enough about my tennis. We have been talking a lot about, some of the things that we enjoy. Like, we enjoy talking about while we're here, and what our true purpose is, as we have the ability, this platform to speak to people. And one of the things that has come up in previous conversations that it seems it needs some more space to breathe here is what you've talked about before, is the 5 rings of player development. And as we've gone on this conversation, we've decided that this definitely needs some explanation, one, around what this is.
Sure.
Not even just for the sake of our listeners, but for listeners now, listeners later, listeners who plan on helping other players develop. What does that path look like? What are those
Sure.
What are those pieces? So we're going to get into that. And then hopefully, later on down the line, we can do a more thorough breakdown of each one of those rings. But want to give you some space to lay out here and give us a kind of an overview of the 5 rings. Yeah.
Sure. This is great. Kind of an episode dedicated to Coach's Corner a little bit here.
Absolutely.
And I like that. I've been coaching for a little over 30 years. And the one thing that continues that I hopefully am getting better at, is it starts to become more congruous and simple. You're not teaching tangents anymore. You're teaching a process, and you're teaching a template, and you're starting to bring things closer together. The 5 rings, think Olympic rings for a visual. Each ring at some point interlaces with another, and we'll get into the detail of that a little later, but they all, in a sense, are interconnected. On the surface, the first ring is your skill development. And by skill development, I think, and it's one of the biggest, and it's probably right smack dab in the middle of the whole thing, we're talking your tactics, your ability to do certain things with the tennis ball, okay? Not to be confused with, which is the lower one, is your stroke development. Now, the two are connected, right? Your stroke development aids and allows your skill development to be what it is. But they're not, they're 2 different things. In fact, I would even say that too many people work on technique or the skill or the stroke development all too often at the expense of the actual skill development. And so they're so busy getting that stroke to look good,
right,
that they forgot that the whole goal was to get the ball to do something. And the technique simply allows that not to break down as often.
Okay.
So,
all right. Okay. So then skilled. Okay. I think the stroke development part is pretty straightforward. Maybe we understand
very straightforward, and in so much that it's technique. And I think the bigger thing people need to understand is, and it changes over time. I'm a 10-year-old kid. Low to high is money. I get the ball deep. I get the ball over the net. Maybe or maybe not have a lot of top spin, but I'm clearing the net and I'm hitting the ball nice. I can only hit it so far. I'm 10, right? Bigger 10-year-olds, right, may hit the ball a little farther. Weaker 10-year-olds are still getting the ball over the net, hopefully on the surface side. It's all good. 12, 13 starts creeping around, and all of a sudden you're launching that ball pretty good. And if you're not finishing more off the shoulder versus over the shoulder, that ball's starting to sail. And now the whole concept of top spin and where you're aiming, maybe even as you start getting to be 15, 16, that ball has to be a little straighter. And your finish has to get even lower, maybe not even dropping the racket down as much. But again, most kids are still kind of dyed in the wool, low to high, right?
Yeah,
and most parents, unfortunately, are still, because they remember that, because it was drummed into the kid when he was 10, right? So these are some things I'm getting at that I want people to kind of understand. It evolves over time. Your ability to get the ball harder, farther, just ability to get the ball faster, and so on. So stroke development, skill development, and then I would probably say the third one down, which I personally think everybody, we pay attention and then we don't, right? It's a weird one. And that's fitness/strength conditioning. I find that the fitness aspect, and by that I'm talking about the ability to go as long as necessary at a point and to do it over and over and over again. So you're hitting parts of the recovery, you're hitting parts of the reaction, your strength, your endurance, your speed. All of that is under this amoebus word fitness. And of course, your strength conditioning is a part of that. But that really is the other piece that's underpinning your game is your ability to get to that darn ball and do it over and over again. A lot of good ball strikers, after ball 6, get a little winded and start bailing out, right? And that's at 52, I do it myself. I'll start slicing that ball after ball 6. Like, okay, that's enough. Let's slow this thing back down a little bit. On the two wings, I feel are two things that we talk about a little bit, but don't talk about as much, and that is the intangibles, and on the other end is the mental. And I like the term mental development because I feel like this is a big one that people don't always understand. The mental development is somewhere in between mental toughness and mental flexibility. I read a good article about it years ago. And mental toughness, which is your ability to do what you're going to do, right? You're pretty much, think of a steel beam, or in the in the ground. It's not giving too much. It doesn't matter what happens. I'm right here. And then of course your flexibility, Mr. Punta Cana, is your palm tree. It flows in the wind. In fact, it's made to flow in the breeze. Little sometimes, hey, no big deal. No big deal. I can handle that too. And it bends and doesn't break. The term mental toughness to me is a little bit of a misnomer because sometimes you want to be a little more flexible. And it's not to say the flexible is you always have to change. You do need to have a core mindset, a way you handle adversity, and a way you handle success as well. But I find that the term mental development is bigger because you start understanding it's a little bit more than just what it is. So again, in summary, you have, I think the most one that everybody needs to kind of key in on in the middle is what we're going to call the tactics or your skill development. What underpins those two is your stroke development, your technique, and then of course your fitness, and that is the big overarching category of speed, power, agility, reaction, quickness, the whole, right? The old Nike Spark. You remember the old Nike Spark?
Yeah, speed, back in the days? Power, agility,
reaction, quickness.
Reaction,
quickness, right? So again, all those pieces, right? Intangibles and mental development. And the intangible is something you can't coach. It could be size. It could be lefty. It could be unbelievable. It could be better than average feel. Whatever that intangible is, you just don't coach it. That person just has it. When the speed picks up, they kind of calm down and zero in on the ball. I can see it when the kid was 8, 9 years old. I can see it when the kid's 11 or 12 and they just shy away from the ball and they just don't want to be at the net, don't want to get hit. That kid probably won't be a great volleyer.
Right.
Not enough time up there to do it. Either way, you can't coach it. You'd like to have more positive intangibles than negative. But the bottom line is, those are the couple of things down the ends that are really going to kind of affect, the upward trajectory of what you're doing. And I find you need to kind of, while you can't affect one over here too much, you can accentuate it. The mental development, I think, is one that we need to spend a lot more time on. Parents in particular with their young kids starting off with the game, we need to have this mentality, growth mindset. And I don't mean just, everybody gets a trophy and everybody, hey, little Johnny, you did great. You lost 0-0, but you played really well. No, little Johnny, you got to beat 0-0. That kid's pretty good. Yeah. Let's get back to work, little Johnny, on seeing how we can handle. Here's the two things that I thought we missed the most, and these things we can do. And in 6 months, we'd love to play that kid again and see how much we progress. But that concept, right? Sometimes the tournaments take on a little bit of a pass-fail, mentality, and really a tournament tends to be, in my opinion, more of a progress report or a checkpoint. This is where I'm at right now, and at this point right now, I'm handling this well, and you know what? I need a lot of work on that. That kid who beat me in the semis, man, he had some things I didn't have an answer for, and now I know what to work on. As opposed to, right, won the tournament, you played great. You probably didn't play great every match. You probably just got through it. And if you lost, it doesn't mean you played horrible. The kid could have been better. You could have had a bad day. You could have had your better match before. Doesn't matter. There are checkpoints. Look out at his matches. and the overview of all of them. And that goes into your mental development, because if you start looking at the tournaments as pass fail, there's going to be a whole lot of failure. You know what I mean? And that would end up kind of hitting you in the, kind of dinging you. We wonder why so many junior players quit at a certain point. How many top junior players don't play much tennis anymore? And how many will go to college and don't pick up a racket anymore? There's a lot of trauma that they've had from some of these pass fail experiences over the years.
Okay, so before we dig into that, because I want to kind of maybe jump around a little bit here now that you've introduced all of the rings. I want to go back to the tactics and skill development part, because I think we did a pretty good job of laying out what stroke development is, right? How we hit the shots, right? And then strength and conditioning, obviously the mental development, and then the intangibles. But what is tactics and skill development?
Excellent question. Tactics to me are your ability to manipulate or impact the ball, period, and everything that it comes with. This could be your ability to, you're a big hitter, you like pace, your ability to drive through the court pretty well, and you literally just have a bigger ball than most. Clearly, your tactic is going to be more hitting through the court, taking away some time. Ideally, if you're pretty good at it, you should be able to follow that up with some sort of net or transition to the net, because you're taking away time. Hopefully, the person's going to try to get their time back by going high or slicing. At that point, you coming forward finishes the play you started, right? That tactic is tied to a lot of mistakes. Hitting the ball lower, hitting the ball close to the line, you do a lot of change of directions, and there's a lot of error. It's a high risk, high reward kind of a game. But there's a tactic. Hitting a heavy ball, the ball that has a lot of shape on it, getting the ball up out of the strike zone. By definition, not as many winners, but you shouldn't be hitting a lot of errors either. The ball, it's very consistent. It's a war of attrition. You're really just trying to get that ball out of guy's strike zone to push him or her back. But you're also trying, and this is the key, you also need to have the ability to counter that same strategy. What's a person going to do? They're likely to hit the ball back. If you don't have an on the rise or a step-up ball to counter what your ball will naturally cause, then your tactic is incomplete. So these are the types of things that you have. Another good one, the handsy players, the all-court, we call it when they get older and grown up and have decent hands. The field players, we call them when they're more rec players and they're adults, but we call them scrappers and pushers back in the day that would love to hit a few deep balls and an occasional drop shot. Do you have the speed to handle the counter drop shot when it comes back? So again, each of the tactics are nice plays in of themselves, but what makes them game styles is your ability to know how to handle them, your ability to execute them off of different types of shots. You can have it on both sides, not just on one wing, your better wing. And to truly be good, you need to have all of them and be able to have your better ones be pretty fine-tuned, but still have the ability to hit another one when necessary in case that better one got matched up or got figured out for the better part of the rest of that first set with something else.
So is this where you would put we used to call them patterns, right? And I guess patterns are that they still exist, right? They're still a 100%. Thing. This is where patterns would actually live then.
Patterns live in the tactics. And the one thing about a good pattern is that a pattern is predictable. You know the ball you want, you know the ball you're going for, at least I hope you do, and you're hitting that ball to get the ball you want back. What is the biggest problem with the pattern? The kid sees it 5, 6, 10 times, they start to counter the pattern. So you need another pattern, or at least a way to get back to the pattern. Simple pong tennis, shoot me right here. Now I know you're lefty. I'm going to get to your backhand. I'm going to get to your backhand. You think I'm going to go down the line to your forehand, but I'm hooking you back wide to your backhand again, causing you to hit a slice. You slice line. I move over to another forehand. I'm not going back to your forehand, Alvin. Sorry about that. Back to your backhand.
She got me.
Right? And at that point in time, my pattern is working. Now, what does Alvin do after I do it for 2 or 3 straight games?
Well, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. At some point, I'm going to have to either take that backhand down the line to your backhand.
Bingo.
Or I'm going to have to kind of cheat over a little bit, take a forehand.
There you go. Yeah. So, and when you do so, right? And let's say you do the same thing back to me, right? Now we are battling. Now the tug of war has begun, right?
The Nadal Federer of things. We are fighting for the same thing.
You got it. And I think people have to understand, and at a certain point in time, That is tactics. Now, if I've got a decent backhand, if I don't mind you going to my backhand, I'm going to be okay. If I'm shielding my backhand, well, then it's going to be who can get that ball or not. And then at that point, again, there's where your tactics lie. The part that I think is often overlooked with tactics is your ability to defend the tactic as well as the ability to attack. A lot of people can do it when they're being attacked or being fed a certain ball. A lot of people can't do it when they have to fight for that ball or they have to defend that pattern to get back.
What do you mean? Give me that scenario again, and then explain what you mean by defend it.
Excellent. I'm serving to you. You like your forehand, but I'm making sure you don't get a forehand on the return. You just can't get around hitting the backhand on that ball. You can't cheat over, pass it out. I'm hitting a slice out wide to your backhand. I just am. At that point in time, for you to break me, you're going to have to hit a backhand at some point in time. Through me, pass me, back cross court, something. If you do, and do it consistently, you might get the point you're looking for back. If your tactics don't, that day, don't merit you having a good backhand cross court enough, well, guess what? I'm going to have my way with you on that forehand side. Vice versa for me. If you do the same thing with your lefty elbow out in the ad, I better have a backhand. We all know what happened with Fed and Nadal. 100% of the time, I think it was one of the matches, he hit the serves to Fed's backhand. 100% of the time in a 4 or 5 set match. There is no guesswork. By about the third set, guess what? He's going to the backhand again. He is not changing it up. But my point being, and that's just where at some point, and years later, Ivan Lubicic, who made Fed come over the top of the backhand because he said, look, dude, you're just not going to get through Nadal with that slice backhand return. You're just not. It won you 12 slams. I'm here to tell you, you won't win anymore. You keep slicing the backhand return. So those are where you're going to have the ability to counter that pattern before you can even get to yours. And Fed and Nadal are obviously two great examples of, tennis greats when they're easy to identify with. But at some point, you have to defend that pattern to get back the one you want.
Okay. So we talked about this at the top as being these rings have to do with development, right? And we're using, I think that it makes the most sense because it is linear, is junior development with a junior player. So when we start talking about these, when you say the rings are interconnected, but there really is no beginning and no end with these rings. But as you're building a player, right, player development is somewhat, I'm not going to say development is linear, but when you have time with a player, that time is linear. So how do these actually work together or in sequence with one another when we're talking about a player-coach development relationship?
It's a great piece. Let me start with that one on the outside, which was that mental development. I think you constantly help a player and a parent to make sure they understand that the mindset continues to be you're incubating it, getting it better and better over time. You're helping the kid understand adjustments. You're helping the kid understand matchups. I tell my kids a lot, I don't care about your mistake. I care about your adjustment. I'm not even worried about the mistake. I know why you made the mistake before you do. I am worried about your adjustment and your mindset on the adjustment. Can you fix it? Okay, you hit 2 balls, you hit 1 ball long, 1 ball in the net, great. Sounds to me like you're about to figure it out. I don't even say anything. You know as well as I do. I see 3 of the same mistakes in a row, I get concerned. I'm like, you tried that same ball 3 times in a row. What didn't you realize the first 2 times, right? So there's one on the mental side of things, helping the kid to understand a little quicker. In the 10s, you can make 2 mistakes in a game and may pull it out. In the 12s, you only get 1 mistake if the kid's pretty good. About 14, 16, buddy, you get 4 mistakes unforced, a set, if you're pretty good. That's it. And unless you have a huge serve weapon that's buying you some chances back, there's a good chance that you already erred out. And I think there's a linear part of what you're speaking to is helping the kid understand that on the mental side, they have to continue to get better at problem solving. They have to get better at getting out of their own head and getting out of their own emotional state. And they have to match up and compete, even if the answer is not quite so obvious at the beginning.
Okay. So this this seems to work really well in an ideal scenario where you get a kid at age, I don't know, 10, and you have parents who maybe played, or parents who are kind of like maybe been through this process before, or have like maybe they read Range by was I can't remember his name was David Epstein. But like they're gonna entrust you with the process, right? And you've got, in this point, you've got 8 years, right? But that's not how it works, right? Because oftentimes you get a player late, quote unquote late. Sometimes
I'd say 10 is late, by the way, but yes.
Fair. Okay. Okay. We might tangent off to that pathway in a second here. Or you don't get the kid for as long as we would like, right? You might get him at, let's say you get him at 12, and this is our 6-year plan, but then they want to switch coaches at 15. Or you get him at 15, and the parents are like, what can you do? So in those,
had both, unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah. So like, how do you approach that at different stages? Like, how do you know where to start, what to do, what the mix should be?
It's a great point. You have to fill in and backfill, right? I'm going to come back to tactics. I was talking about mental and basically incubating and making sure that, I'm going to use my green egg analogy, low and slow. When I'm cooking my brisket, you got to keep that in there a long time. You got to set the right temperature, try not to change it, make sure the kid knows, parents, so everybody's kind of on page. Ideally, get the kid at 7, maybe a bit early, but they really understand it. And you have them long enough to let that part of the smoke, so to speak, seep into your, in this case, into your brisket just right. And the longer it's in there, the better it's going to be. If you don't get the kid as early, that's okay, but you're going to have less smoke, so to speak, on that, in our case, on this brisket. It'll still be brisket. It won't be Texas brisket. It won't be, what was the spot you and I went to in Austin, that had the
it might have been, oh God, maybe Friedman's. It might have been Friedman's.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking of Friedman's. It won't be Friedman's, right? And it's just to say it won't be as good, as tender, as just mouth watering. Now, let's come back to tactics. I have to have a tactic to work with. I've got to develop one. And at some point, I've got this 15-year-old, I've got to realize, are they on level? Are they behind? Or are they ahead? And that, I just typically, if I get them at that point, they're probably late. The coach before me or the kid themselves did not develop the tactic needed for their age group. He's a 15-year-old who's still playing with his 12's game. He just happens to have 15-year-old speed and power. He's still hitting heavy balls. He's still running around everything. Still got no backhand. Doesn't have a big serve. And at some point, he's playing in 16s now, right? The kid could just be a little small for his age and size. And he hadn't grown. Okay, no problem. That's not his fault. But he still had better get darn good at returning, darn good hitting on the run, and had better get his passing shots down like nobody's business, because he's going to have to let that be his counterpunch, and counterpunishing is going to have to be his tactic of choice until he does grow, fill in, and get some bigger weapons.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Okay, so now I have a bunch of more questions. Okay, so when we're talking about this, right, when we use the brisket analogy, at what point do you and the parent, and maybe at this point it's less the kid, right, because the kid is young, have an understanding of what the goal is, right? Because if the goal is to, if the goal is to be playing at nationals by age 16s and 18s, then we approach things a little bit differently at age 10 and 11 versus the parent. I once had a parent tell me, and this blew my mind wide open when it came to the way I approached player development. She told me, like, I was talking to them about she had 2 kids ahead of this player and 1 behind. So she had 4 kids in our program. And I was teaching kid 3, lefty, fast, athletic, like my kind of kid.
Right.
My kind of
a chip off the old Alvin. Yeah,
you give me a little 11-year-old girl that's left-handed and fast. I'm like, that one right there is mine.
Yeah.
Quirky little sense of humor too. Anyways, I was like, this summer, we need to have her ready for this particular tournament. It's like usually the first week of June. Want to have her really hit her stride then. She's like, oh, well, we're going to be on vacation that week. And I'm like, vacation that week? And I was like, well, if we're talking about, college tennis and stuff like that, we have to really kind of prioritize this tennis thing at this point. It kind of leads the horse, if you will. And she was like, yeah, it doesn't really matter if she plays college tennis. It's like, it's not the goal. We just want her to have fun, get good at something. And if she plays, great. If she does, and she doesn't, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh, interesting. At that point, I didn't realize that, like, she went to Duke. Her husband went to Duke. They both grad school at Princeton, and so on and so forth. All the kids, college scholarship was not going to be a problem. They were all great students. Like, this is truly an opportunity for them to develop, and they were all really good players. Yeah. So I say that to say,
dare I say better, because of no pressure.
No pressure at all.
Right.
No pressure at all. I think 3 of them went on to play college tennis. So it worked out fine. The other one just went to Duke to be a student. And he might have been the best of all of them. So
right.
I say that to say, like, but once I understood, once I understood what their family goal was, it made the way I approached her as a player and what we chose to work on that much clearer. So with that, how important is that for, the way that you look to develop players?
It's hugely important, because let's face it, it's their child, and between them and the kids, the goals. My uncle was an architect, Alvin, and he always gave me this great short story. He says, my first 10 years being an architect, I was so quick to show you how good I was that I was giving you my design.
Yeah.
He says, my second 10 years, I started listening to the client more, and I started drafting what they wanted into my design. And he says, and by my last years as an architect, I realized it was all about what the client wanted, and I could give them some ideas and help them to figure out what they wanted on paper. But the reality of it was all about them. I was just a really good tool, helping them reach that goal. And I thought that was a neat way he always said it, and helping the perspective go a little bit away from you and a little more on to the kid and what they want to do. And your parent, that was a great example. Often I find we don't get enough parents like that that are so laissez-faire about the whole situation. Most of them are manic about the results, and we're having to kind of bring them back down a notch, if not 2, about resetting a realistic expectation. You got a kid that does a day a week of drills, won't know why they're not making the tournament, not going to nationals, and you're like, play 1 day a week. What do you expect to do anything on 1 day a week at any high of a level? But that parent taught you, and parents like that have taught me a very valuable lesson of, let's not always project our wants to get the kid good into that kid. We don't coach them necessarily any different, but maybe not as urgent. Maybe we don't raise our voice as much. Maybe the urgency of the deal may not be there as well. You still have a care. They still want to get good. I feel all people to some degree are competitive. And then you kind of, maybe if the competitive part isn't as big of a deal, maybe it's a little more to be the best. A lot of people kind of see it as a quality thing, or maximizing the potential kind of thing, or to truly hit it. If you could hit this cone in this spot, you're pretty accurate. At that point, now you're kind of getting away from, the quantitative and more into the qualitative in that sense. So I like that. Again, typically it's the other way around. We have the parent that's a little more manic. How do they lose? They've been a UTR this for so long. They're not improving. We need to change. And maybe not. Let's look at what got you there, and let's look at where you're at. Where's your game? Where's your skills? Comparative to your group that you're in. And I think that's where you need to kind of maybe take a little bit of inventory. I like to add one more thing back to what you're talking about with your parent. It's that the parent probably did a nice job indirectly while the kids didn't well off the college tennis, because they just kept developing, perhaps inside of a better bubble, where they didn't have to worry so much about the outside impact of results. And so every kid that I know that over stresses about UTRs and rankings, they're constantly dragging the weight of results behind them. And it's like driving around town with the emergency brake on. You just will never reach your full potential, because at every stroke, at every match, you're worried about your UTR. You're worried about, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? This player's below me. I can't be losing this match to this kid. And those kind of kids are basket cases. And often because they use that metric to define who they were and how good they were, not using them just as checkpoints. It's just reflective of my last 20 matches. It's really all it is. It's not a big deal. And those are things that I think need to really be stressed. Again, go back to that mindset. It has to be done right. And once that bad thing kind of kicks in, my brother would tell me about if you put the wrong kind of wood, let's say I put some pine or whatever else in my green egg, you can't get that smoke, that bad smoke out of a piece of meat. You can't. It's in there. You're better off throwing the thing away. It's going to have a pungent and a different aroma. And the same, meat was good. Everything else was good. Prep was good. Doesn't matter. That smoke just has a way of just acidifying. Instead of adding flavor, you'll never get it out.
Let's take a look at this though, because from a parent standpoint, and I can appreciate this because our sport is not a cheap one, right?
Right.
The cost of development in our sport can easily exceed $40,000-$50,000 a year when you're talking
100%.
About private coaching,
100%.
Equipment, proper place to train. Not even gotten into the tournament aspect of yet, the travel, all of that stuff. It's an expensive sport, it's also often seen as an investment, right? An investment into this child, into this player, and with the unspoken kind of the return on that investment is usually like want to play college tennis or something like that, right? Which is becoming more and more difficult for American players anyways. But it's very hard to say this to a parent, have them understand it, but like tennis is the sport of a lifetime, right? And if a kid starts, we're as a parent is responsible for a kid's tennis from age, let's say 8 to 18, right? That's a very small window into their overall development, potentially as a player, right? A guy I met this weekend, the last week, said the same thing. He's 42, the same age I am. He's like, man, I'm still getting better. I'm still getting better. And this guy's pretty good. I'm like, I feel like I am too. I might not be as fast as I used to be. I might not be able to recover as well as I used to be, but I still feel like I can get a little better each week. I can hit the ball a little bit cleaner. I can maybe be a little bit sharper in my decision making. But that's really, at that point, I'm well past there being any stakes to this, right? And I wish I could have, as a player, have felt that freeness. And I wish parents could allow their children to feel that freeness as they go through the junior development process, because there's so much more tennis to be played afterwards.
Dare I say some of your best tennis afterwards?
Probably so. If you consider
you'll understand it better.
And your physical peak is much later.
Your physical peak isn't at 18, right? For most people, and so on.
Thinking on a tennis court is really hard when you're going through puberty, man. It's like 13 to 15. Like you can't see straight half the time. How are you supposed to?
You can't see straight, nor are your emotions allowing you to do so. There's two things I want to touch on. Number one, and I've said this to parents, if you're already thinking, especially in the pre-15, 14, 13 age group, if we're already thinking about return on investment, stop. Just stop right now. Get out of the game. Find a cheaper sport. It won't get any cheaper. And I'm not here to sell hope to you that this kid will go somewhere and get that scholarship. And in many times, the investment towards said scholarship is not the same return in terms of dollar amounts. You might spend that $50,000 a year for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, right? Or maybe it starts off at 10 and it ends up ballooning up to 50 as you start really getting into the throes of it. But that was a decision along the way that you wanted to continue to roll the dice and see how good your kid could
roll the dice. It's right? A dice roll.
Right. It's completely a dice roll and a decision you made to roll said dice. You invested in your child, not in the investment of him going to said school. You invested in your child's journey. How good could they get? But again, 15, 16, you're starting to understand my kid can be pretty good. We've gone through 3 age divisions now. He's made nationals, the national level ones, all 3 times. For 12s, 14s, now it's 16s. Feel pretty good about where he ended up. And you know what? He really wants this to play at the next level. We're going to go through at 18s. We're going to see him through. Your kid's hitting a bit of a crossroads. He's not making nationals. He used to. He's not getting as good. You need to look at your coaching, look at your kid. More importantly, is your kid wanting it enough to continue? Don't look at the money. Look at your kid's effort. Is your kid wanting to hit balls? Is your kid waiting in the car for you? Is your kid setting up hits on his own? is your kid hitting serves down at the neighborhood courts, or he say, hey, time for tennis. Tennis, look, then you might already be done.
Right.
You know what I mean? So forget the investment. At that point, you might need to just cut your losses and say, hey, we tried, and you will still have the game for a lifetime, but let's not pour sand down this rat hole. And the other part of it is, I think that I want to speak to is, too often when the return on investment becomes the focus, you're not looking at all of the many wins that kid is having on the court. You're not looking at all of the maturity the kid is having. You're not looking at all of the he's facing a lot of his own demons, from talking up for himself to handling some sparks on the court, dealing with some bad calls. Those are things that are going to prove that kid to be a lifetime worth of achievement. He or she will reflect back on tough moments on the court in their lifetime. And you can't put a price tag on that either. So, and the last add to that is, how many kids do you know, Alvin, that you grew up playing with? You had some of the most well-to-do parents that ended up being the person that helped sign off on their internship, the person that helped get that person the job when they got out of school. They end up being roommates in college or played that kid in college, and that the resources and networking they had from the sport, which again it's a huge deal. Not to mention they ran with a pretty good crowd. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the exception of the two brothers out there in California that had some unfortunate situation with their parents, the tennis crowd's a pretty good crowd.
It's a great community.
And
it's a great community.
It's a support group. I mean, everybody's there supporting each other. When you want to beat each other on the court that time to one up the other one, when you come to that net and you clap hands, man, and it's about respect and how and buddy, I can't wait to play you again. That was fun. You know what I mean? And whatever happened, you left it out there on the court, and you're probably going to go to Chipotle together later. Hey man, you play doubles next weekend? Let's play doubles next week. That's the sign of a great match, is when your opponent, who you may have thought was a jerk or whatever, asked you to play doubles, and it was your first time beating him or taking him 3, and he's like, man, you've gotten better. There is no better compliment than having that come from an opponent who didn't have no reason to tell you, anything for your own benefit. He just told you the truth. And so those are things that I think also happen that you really don't always appreciate in your child's development as a person.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. You kind of going back in the conversation a little bit, you mentioned that 15-year-old who's playing 16 and unders tennis with their same 12 and under game style. Yeah. You briefly touched on what I'll call the ways of winning at each age group category, right? So that was, one of the two things I wanted to kind of hit on. What does it take to not necessarily be successful at, but are you saying to be successful at that age group, or as a marker of, okay, this player is on the right path to get to X goal because they're doing this by age in 12 and unders, they're doing this in 14 and others?
I think it's more the latter. Let's just break it down hopefully in a very concise way. I'll go to 8, since you said 8 through 18. 8 and under, ideally a kid gets to the ability to be consistent, at least off of one side.
Okay.
They can make balls. They can rally enough balls with a parent. I don't care if they're hitting red ball, orange ball, or green ball. It doesn't matter. They can rally. Ellie, one of the ladies I work with at the River Club, has a little 4-year-old named Emma. And this girl, cute little black girl with braids, Alvin, she's 4 years old. The girl can rally red ball, both sides, 20 balls. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And she's in pink Crocs and about that big, and she's hitting balls. You already know she's going to be a good little player because she can rally already at that young of an age. It's just going to be a matter of how good could she get. And her parents keeping her humble and keeping her hungry, right? 8 and under needs to be able to rally, period. 10 and under needs to be able to rally and understand the basics of spin, top spin, drive, or top spin and maybe even a little bit of slice if they're pretty handsy. If they're really good, they'll have all 3, but they just need to understand that and have the weakness, if you will, fixed, patched, under construction to a large degree, something. They don't have that wing that's a little bit weaker. 12 and under, now you're starting to understand how I can match up what I want versus what you don't want. And this is now where tactics really start coming in, where it's a little more skill set based early. Now it's a little more tactic based and more, I'm hitting my strength to your weakness. I know how to do it. And if I'm pretty good at it, I can start. Hopefully I don't have one myself that gets exposed. And at some point I have that going through. 14 and under, I better start having a weapon. And the weapon doesn't have to be big serve or big forehand. Although those are nice, sometimes those are size induced, right? If you're 5'2", playing in the 14s, you're probably not going to have a huge serve. You may, but chances are it may not. But again, as I said earlier, your return can be good. Your on the run can be pretty good. Your slice can be pretty good. And you may have best passes that no one that the world see. And that's, again, let that be your weapon. Your fitness maybe unbelievable, right? Whatever the case may be, but have it based on kind of where you are, but have one, right? Because in 16s, I got to have two. And so everything, so at some point it continues to go. In the 14s, I want to make that point. No weaknesses left, period. If you can help it. 0. Now, I'm not saying everything in your tool, in your golf bag has to be phenomenal, but you can have no weaknesses. In the 12s, you should have pretty much every tactic. You should have the drive, the spin, the roll, the slice, the drop shot, the lob, the angle, on both sides. You may not be the best at it, but you're not hitting. You know what I mean? And at that point, you may have what you like to do, but you can still do this. Going into 16, you need 2 weapons. And you need the ability to counter a common game style. Be that big serve, big forehand, right? Be that the inside out with your backing on the line. Whatever the case may be, you have to defend one and have 2 yourself, right? See you one and I raise you 2, right? Sort of thing. 18s to me is all about putting it together, and you have not 1, not 2, but technically 3 game styles. Your main, your backup, and I can do this if I need to. The big serve, big forehand has the ability to grind, and buddy, don't sleep. I can still come in and knock off a volley when I need to serve a volley to close you out the game. I can slice up. I had to slice, even though I'm more of a banger. If I get out wide, don't sleep. I can stay steady and break it down a point or two, and just to change it up. But there is your 8 through 18s, from heavy skill all the way down to heavy tactics, all the way through, and they both kind of convert in the middle. Obviously, heavy on the fitness late, not as much early, right? No, my 8-year-old's really fast. Well, that's great, and at the end, when no one's looking at your technique per se by the 18s, you can't fix it much now anyway. You got to go with what you have, but everything starts going a lot more tactical, a lot more execution, a lot more, match tough. And are you really problem solving at that point in time? So there is your 8 through 18 window. Back to that 15-year-old. Does he or she have those 12s and 14 skills? I coached a young man named Andres Martin, and Andres was a pretty good player, but wasn't that high in the rankings. In the 14 and in the 12s, had his transition and volleys were phenomenal. His hands were great. Well, at that age, didn't have a great serve. He's 12, and he's coming forward, but he's really kind of playing some decent approaches and having good volleys. But once he got a serve,
right,
the transition kicked in. The kid went from probably 20 or 30 in state to probably 20 or so in the country, like all within a year. So ranking wise, he wasn't as strong, but you knew he was going to get better once he got other weapons. Kid ended up playing number 1 for Tech. He was a great player. I say it to say, I think Aja's still out there playing something. You understand the concept.
Yeah,
it's not just say where that kid who was number 1 in the 12s, right? Who was a kid that we also coached at that time, did end up playing college tennis. He was a top player. I want to say top 10, top 20 in the country. Had great feel, good hands, fast little kid. They ended up both going to Tech. One didn't play college tennis. So just game could have continued to mature and develop. But again, he had great 10-year-old game and great 12s game. Then he continued to develop his game toward 14s, 16s, and 18s as he could have. A little tied to some of his early wins, and didn't want to, for whatever reason, wasn't able to make the other steps, get the weapons, make the other changes needed to continue to be relevant toward the later age groups.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that. Last question I've got for you. Yeah. You mentioned that. I don't know if it was like 8 or 9. I mentioned as an age to start. No, you got a kid at 10. You said that was too late. Ideally, give me the ideal scenario here. Kid at age 18 is playing Division I tennis high level. Take me all the way back. When does that kid start? Because there have been lots of different ways that this has been poked at.
Way. I would never be the person to tell you there's only one way to do it. That's number one. I have seen kids start at 12 that'll play D1 tennis and great. I have seen kids that played multiple sports and committed to tennis full time by 12, 13 that were great.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen kids that started at the age 4, 5 that were completely average by the time they got to college level. To me, it depends on the kid. Back to the 5 rings. How much do they develop all 5 rings? One of the things that gets parents, in my opinion, today, especially, I see it happen with baseball a lot, not so much with tennis.
Yeah.
They are committing so early to baseball. I got in this conversation with one of the parents who I was talking, who played many years pro baseball, and we were laughing at some of the parents that played pro ball, baseball, football, that were all big on their kid playing this travel baseball deal. Each one of them played 4, sometimes 5 sports in high school back in the day. They know the benefit of playing multiple sports, but they're all in to keep their kids on this roster, this travel team roster, for all the kudos and all the trips and all the being included. And me and the player were laughing about, what are they doing? They know better. They're not some guy, some bozo who's good business guy and had money to shell out for his kid to play, but he never played. These guys played, and they know what it's like to be an athlete and play at the highest level, and they're not giving their kids the chance to play those multiple sports. So it's easy to get caught up on. In that world of, I got to specialize, I got to do this all the way through. And you've seen the research on number of kids with Tommy Johns, on pictures that overthrew their arm by the time they were 14, 15, all on the pursuit to get to the College World Series. And none of them to Little League World Series, and none of them made College World Series. And I see that's a big problem. It's a big problem in a lot of sports that I find that people are specializing too soon. I would tell a parent, do your best to maximize each of the 5 rings. Start as early as you can. And by start, I mean just that. Hit balls with your kid. Take them out, drop feed. You have a little one who's 3 or 4, you think they got a little hand-eye, get a paper plate and a tongue depressor and glue and get a balloon and fill it up about hand size and have them hit that darn thing where they can, and make sure they don't knock it on any flower vases and whatnot in the house, and have them hit that thing and see what they do. And they get to about 5 or 6, have them take the garage, the courts at the local, get you a foam ball and have them hit that bad boy back and forth a few times if they can. Put them in the middle with you when you and the wife are hitting back and forth. Let them hit the ball too. That's what I mean by getting started. If the kid looks like he's got decent attention span, some decent hand-eye, you know what? We'll throw him in the tennis drill and see what he can do. Get him playing a little bit of junior USTA. Get that little one on the team. Let him kind of have a little taste of competition early before he gets too bad. Now, could you do all that by the time the kid was 8? Of course you could. Usually, this is what happens a lot, the better kid of the family started a bit earlier, right? Travis was a little better at certain ages than you were. My brother was a better athlete than I was, but they also had us to look to.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that practice and that by osmosis and that, I'm better than my brother, that every younger sibling's wired, right, to have, that they had. And the parents made better decisions based off what they knew from us, right? So Larry Hawkins and Dixon also knew, well, the second one I know better now. Well, I figured out on my first one, and not that we were trials or experiments, but they just knew better.
Yeah, it's first time through.
So I think the second one, whatever, starting earlier is a little more convoluted in terms of, look at the environment was a little bit different from a knowledge standpoint. That second could have started at a younger age simply because the old one was already going on. Serena is a great example of Venus. So I say that to say, I hate to get pinned down on the age. I do think 10's a bit late there, but I don't like a 5-year-old if they don't have attention span. And I think at some point, if they're just over there doing hit and giggle and they're whiffing 25 times out of 25, it's probably not the best use of your money and your time. You could do a little better with that with something else. have them play some soccer, have them something else, swimming, martial art, where they can kind of master another level of athleticism, body control, core strength, basic motor skill, movement, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
where tennis is going to always need the athleticism, but it won't necessarily give it to you. Tennis, soccer, basketball, sports like will make you happen. It will demand and improve just due to you having to compete with the speed and the maximum opponent. Tennis will reward you for having it, but if you specialize on tennis too early, tennis won't give you that. In fact, you have great looking strokes, but your athleticism may be actually to the detriment because you didn't do enough of another sport or something else to continue to work on those skills so that you did get the speed, power, the agility, the reaction time down pat. And that's one of the issues I see is kids that go to tennis early often negate the other sports that they need to. Give me a
Yeah.
kid who's played 4 sports, who's coming to tennis by 10, I can get it. I can catch him up very quickly. Give me a
And
kid who's played tennis since he was 5, only done tennis, did nothing else, and he might be a bit slow and a little bit, and a little bit heavy in the foot. He's gonna have a tough time being good in the later stages of the game because he didn't play enough other sports, play as
yeah.
many other sports to help that athleticism keep up with his tennis. Again, and that's where I put those 3 things in the middle: the tactics, the stroke, the technique, and then the fitness slash athleticism has to be there to match. Otherwise, you won't get to your full potential.
Yeah, and I referenced this book earlier. It's called Range. It's
Range,
written by
sure.
David Epstein. And I'm a huge proponent of the kind of the path that he lays out for junior athletic or youth athletic development. And I'm in my early 40s, and when I talk to other parents, and I tell them that I played tennis in college, and that I've coached various levels of junior players, and they're like, "Oh, what are your thoughts on it?" Like, as their kids are just getting started in sports, I'm like, "Look, my view is this: have them play as many things as they want as early as possible. Let them play a lot of things, because one of the downsides of specializing too early is like you might have picked the wrong sport. You specialize in tennis, maybe softball was their calling, or you're going heads down on baseball, and maybe you had a pitcher that was like itching to get out. You don't know until they try things, right? So I feel like a sport like tennis, if you combine it with like basketball and soccer and let's just say swimming, right? Tennis is so skill driven that I'm right there with you that like pick up these skills, especially like the spatial awareness with like a stick and a thing coming at you, like get as comfortable with that as early as possible. So like you can start playing at 5, like doing it. Doesn't mean you need to be playing tournaments at 6. Doesn't need to be going to drills at 8. Like, play some other things. But then like by the time we start to, like, assuming this player has some stuff, right? Knows how to hit a forehand, backhand serve, volley, overhead, all that kind of stuff, and they've played other sports. So once we start to get to 12, that's about the time we need to start getting serious about where we're going with this thing. And then when you start seeing it at 13, something's there, gas pedal. Like now we got to go.
Yep.
And that's probably when we need to start dropping the other sports got to go at that point, because it does.
And let those sports choose, right?
Right.
Let the schedule and the length of season of said sport choose. At some point, you're going to go to state with this sport and this team, right? At some point, that's dictated to you by the success of said team. And you're going to be with that team the next year, hopefully, and continue to do it. And at some point, the other sport, let's say it's just rec league or church league, it's not as important. And you were a nice little player. You played one season on the better team, and you rode the bench, and you were not really as good as you thought you were. But you're really good on this team here, and that happens, right? My son played soccer for a lot of years. He was a decent little tennis player, played soccer, loved soccer, pretty fast, but wasn't as strong. Loved being a striker, ended up being more of a defensive mid. Ended up being a pretty decent goalie. He's pretty tall. He had good instincts for the ball. Kept moving further and further back toward the goal because he wasn't
the same thing happened to me.
Right. So now here's the irony of it is, as we look back on it, to your point, my son had pretty good leg. And I always used to tell him, we joked about it sometimes, you ought to just work on kicking and be a field goal kicker or like a punter for for your high school team. You got a pretty good boot. I mean, could boot the ball darn near 3/4 of the length of a whole soccer field of a regulation field. I mean, huge leg. But it was one of those things where he was so tied up in soccer. I was obviously coaching a lot of tennis. We never pursued that part of it.
Right. Yeah.
And when we laugh now about watching games, like, that guy's making $500,000 a year right now.
Yeah.
Kicking the ball straight.
Yeah.
Like, I had a pretty good leg day. And I'm like, I mean, please don't bring it up again. I think about it all the time. But to your point, you get sort of in that one thing, and I think I've seen a lot of kids do that. I've seen a lot of kids and parents kind of, almost make the on tennis, and, I'm like, yeah, one or two things happen. You got cut from the other sports. So This is what's left. Or you just decided that this is one that you liked and that you and the kid could play. You didn't want to waste your time at taxi driving all around Atlanta for the other sports. And so you thought this was one you'd be all in on, but you didn't. You chose it. The sport didn't choose you, and I think that's a big problem. We tend to, it's going to be good because we've said so. And that's just because you want to be good at something does not make it so. So the real neat thing I like about all this, Alvin, is I'm hoping our listeners and viewers understand wherever you are, be you 10, be you 15, be you 20, right? The tennis journey is still going on. Be you 20s, 30s, or 40s, right? Or older like me.
Yeah.
Your tennis journey is still going on. You're still figuring out things. You're still figuring out decisions and tactics. There's still a lot of decisions we made on that cross court versus down the line. You can still decide when to do and what to do. And I feel like that's one of the parts that I love about tennis. You can always get better. Your skills can always get better. Your tactics can always get better. Unfortunately, Father Time is undefeated, right? So at some point you may come down. But as your physical and your fitness and your athleticism tends to decrescendo, your mind and your acuity and your steadiness and hopefully your emotion, you're a little more steady in the mind too. And that tends to make up for, if not surpass, any step slow. And you're playing other 50-year-olds, right? You're not playing 20-year-olds,
exactly.
Right? Now it's all relative, right? So don't go out there and play the Kalamazoo winner. I mean, and they go, oh, my game is still, no, but it's not that. That's passed you by,
Well, they'll humble you real fast.
Oh my God! Oh, we had Sko on our episode a few episodes ago, and Alvin, I never forget. Sko was probably 15 or 16, so I had to have been about 30, 31, give or take. I was still in really good shape. I was hitting balls. I was hitting pretty good, and we were, by this point in time, he's with a lot of players, and I'm in half court setting, feeding balls, but I still was hitting a little bit. And one day we were over my neighborhood courts and I said, Sko, let's play a set. I mean, I was hitting well. Sko looked at me and he smiled. He says, you sure you want to do that? And I said, well, I'm like, I was almost incredulous at his answer. And he says to me, it ain't the same as half court. And so now he's called me out. I mean, I thought that I'm like, buddy, I'm gonna lace you up. But if I can't move for 2 days, I'm gonna tear you apart right here, right now. I opened up Alvin with probably 2 or 3 aces right off the rip. I mean, I was bombing serves, hitting the ball pretty well. 40 love turned into, he got the return back deep. I should have round around it, Alvin, but I said, no, I'll hit my backhand fine. I'll get the next one. I never got the next one.
Never got the next one.
He kept me in a backhand hook angle rally where I had to slice a backhand. I had to get back. He ran me side to side for about 10 balls. Alvin, 40-15, I had to go to the towel. I did not realize, and he looked over at me and he smiled at me, he says, and he's kind of shaking his head. Like, yeah, I told you. Alvin, I'm in pretty good shape, but I haven't played sets since college.
Yeah.
Missed my first serve at 40-15. Second serve, he backs up and goes heavy again. I'm like, oh. I had another long point. Came in, missed the ball by about this much. Oh, Alvin, now I'm panicking. I'm like, oh, God.
First game.
I'm going to blow this game. I'm going to blow this game. Alvin, we probably had a 10-minute first game. The only problem was the longer it took was more of a death of 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, I was literally using my whole set's worth of energy in this first game. Needless to say, He ground me down and won the first game and got the break. Mentally, I was already done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I couldn't let my pride go. I had a couple of good points. We had a couple of deuce games in his game. Returns are never my strong suit. I say this for the listeners out there, 30 versus the top in the country 16-year-old. I was overmatched. I got down 5-0 and I pulled some anonymous injury just so I wouldn't, just so he couldn't say he begged for me.
There it is.
But I would say it to say, me and Scope talked about this, and he laughed at me. He says, T, people don't realize how brutal things is. When you say you play tennis, a lot of people play some doubles, they do drilling, hit a few balls. They ain't playing singles, and they ain't playing high-level singles. And it's funny because Sco's close to the age now that I was then, right?
Yep.
And so we're laughing about it now, and he's like, man, I can do singles. You kidding me? Singles work. And we're laughing about it. But we were, even you and I had him on the air, online before we went on air. And I'm like, oh, you see what I mean now? And he was like, man, I saw it then. He goes, I saw it then. I didn't know what you were doing. It was like, and I was in good shape out. I'm still running a 40 sub 5 seconds. I'm pretty good shape, but the endurance, woo, buddy, it's a whole different. And
it's chaotic. It's chaos. Singles is chaos. It's not cross court groundies.
Got that right.
It's not a 4-ball. It's not a 4-ball drill. It's just
buddy,
nutty nonsense.
Ball machine where you know it's coming. Nadal had a quote one time about him playing somebody, and he says he likes playing him, and he said we both like to suffer a little bit, and he said it just like that. Like both of us like to suffer a little. Like you have to kind of be willing to suffer a little bit on the court if you're really going to be a gladiator. A tennis player like that out there. And I thought that was kind of a neat word because you don't think about playing singles as suffering, but buddy, anybody who's pretty good knows you're suffering out there going chasing those balls side to side. So I think
the wise words of Rafael Nadal is a good place for us to wrap up. TH, I appreciate it. I think the plan is we're gonna expound on these 5 rings in a bit of a more of a series / episodic breakdown over the next few months. We're going to really dig into it and do something that we both love to do, but both love to teach and to coach and to, I think you're going to be doing the majority of the talking, but I've got a lot of questions for you, my friend.
Well, you keep them coming. And for those parents, juniors, players who are coaches, hopefully that are chiming in, please continue to work a little on all 5 rings. Please continue to work a little bit on all of them. Don't, eat your corn, turn the plate, then eat your potatoes, and then turn the plate, then get to your protein. Keep it going at all times. I see so many players that have one part that looks so good and one part that just looks like it was never even worked on, touched. And it just, to me, it kills the kid's eventual because one part, the other parts can't be worked on. It can't even be used because one part is so far behind. And one part may be so far ahead. The biggest thing I see is in forehands and backhands. The backhands are just awful. Forehand looks pretty good, big forehand, but they've let the kid run around it for the last 3 years. And guess what? 1,000 forehands to 110 backhands. Guess what? The backhand's never going to catch up. So little things like that. The kids that are mental, get them working on how to be calm now. Don't wait until they're 14 playing big time tournaments and then you knew they were powder keg at 10 and you never gave them some things to work with and give them some coping mechanisms and whatnot early on. It's only going to get harder. Every age only gets harder. You know what I mean? So it's something that, their 24-year-old self will look back at their 14-year-old self and thank you for working on all those rings and not letting one of them go. So,
amen. All right. With that, best of 3.
Best of 3.
We are
Thanks,
out.
Alvin.